In Chapter 3, we talk about what's happening inside the firm as the second part of our analysis. So here's what you should be getting out of this lesson, out of the reading and out of the slides. In general, what you're going to hear us talk about is the resource-based view of the firm. And the resource-based view does not deny that the external environment is important. It doesn't fight with the IO theory per se. It just says what happens inside the firm is also very important. And so if you go to the resource-based view to answer strategy's fundamental question, which is, why do some firms outperform others? Their answer would be that the firm either has better resources available to it, or it does a better job of combining those resources. And certainly there's a lot of truth in that. So some of the classic questions, the idea that looking at the internal analysis is what can the firm do to meet the challenges and the opportunities it sees in the external environment. And we talk about strengths and weaknesses. And so what you're doing is, in this process, you're taking the firm resources and you're seeing how they translate into capabilities. Now, here's one of the questions I want you to be pondering as you go through these videos and as you do the reading. Are weaknesses something to be worked around, or are they be something to be fixed? And I shouldn't say are they. The question becomes, when are they something to be worked around, and when are they something to be fixed? And I want to make sure you keep this in mind as you go through the readings and we talk about these issues, and that is that the key is always customer value. And ultimately, again, we're going to be hard-headed strategists and say customer value is generated when customers are willing to pay for something. Bottom line, does it show up in the price that they're willing to pay, ultimately? And some of what we're going to do in the internal analysis is we're going to take a look and say, what are the costs involved with generating that particular value? This is an outstanding way to tackle this problem. Unfortunately, this is not a chart out of your textbook, so stop the video or whatever, take the time to look through this chart, because it's really a good way to think about this internal analysis. It starts with resources, and then it talks about combining them into capabilities, which then become core competencies. Now you see that little yellow box I put onto the schematic and said, what is going on here? This truly is the weakness of the resource-based view of the firm, and it's that how firms take resources and turn them into core competencies is still what we would call a black box. Nobody really knows exactly how it is and why it is. Some firms do this better than others, because that's a huge part of it. In many cases, firms have access to the same resources, and yet they develop very different competencies. Why is that? And part of that is managerial, and I'll tell you about the end result of a study that I did that may surprise you as far as the conclusions. And so then we're going to talk about this idea of what makes a core competence truly special. When does it lead to a competitive advantage? And we're going to look at the value chain. And I think the value chain is one of those concepts that seems dirt simple, and the textbook does a great job of explaining the value chain, but it's really important. And then at the end, the end product of all of this work, hopefully, is making decisions that will lead us to a sustained competitive advantage. Again, the textbook does a great job of talking about the two types of resources, tangible and intangible. It creates, for reasons unknown to me, this idea of third block of organizational capabilities. I would just assume you kind of X that through and not worry about the organizational capabilities, and then focus on the resources. They do a great job of defining what resources fit into what categories, and that's important to understand. Typically, what you're going to see today is that firms feel like that the intangible resources are a source of competitive advantage as opposed to the tangible resources, and the textbook does a great job of explaining the evolution of that thought. But what you're going to see what we're doing is we're going to try to peel a little bit deeper in our class discussion to get at why is that so? Does it necessarily have to be that way? This is the next key point, though, when we start to say, okay, we've got a resource or it's become a capability. Does it lead to competitive advantage? And these are the four questions that are central to that. Is it valuable? Is it rare? Can it be substituted for? Is it hard to imitate? And in the next video, I'm going to dive into these four criteria and develop them in some detail in terms of applicability. Join me then.